Now, the Covid-19 Economists Group is calling on government to issue an ambitious social bond system to fund the fight against Covid-19 and to help fill government's funding gap. Now, the group says the social bond should target 100 billion rand from offshore as well as domestic investors. Government is currently considering a range of proposals to help the economy recover and to fund the 500 billion rand stimulus package. So could social bonds be the answer, and how would they work? Let's get you that information now. Convener of the Covid-19 Economists and Commissioner at the National Planning Commission, Dr. Miriam Altman, joins us now via our Skype line. Dr. Altman, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning. So I've been reading up about the key differences between them, but you're obviously best placed to tell us the key differences between social bonds and a normal government bond.
Oh, well, the social bond that we're proposing is different in the sense that it's more like an impact bond, which means that it's earmarked towards specific outcomes. When you're raising money as government, generally it's going into a general revenue fund. We're still proposing that this goes into the general revenue fund, but that it's earmarked to certain kinds of outcomes. The way that a social bond works is that the return on the bond is lower, and we're suggesting trying for a repo rate, which is very low, if you achieve the targets that you've stated. For example, bringing in equipment, wage support, or whatever it is that the commitments are. If you don't achieve that target, then you ratchet back up to, say, an 8%.
So, Dr. Altman, if I understand you correctly, these are targeted investments that have positive socio-economic outcomes, but it sacrifices somewhat the financial returns.
Well, it absolutely sacrifices the financial returns. We're seeing that there's a potential to leverage ESG requirements that companies have and pension funds have, and that means the environmental, social and governance imperatives. A review that Intellidex did, the paper was actually authored by Stuart Theobald and Peter Attard-Montalto at Intellidex, and they had done a survey of the top 29 pension funds late last year that showed that one of their highest priorities, 75% of them actually said that one of their highest priorities is to increase the proportion of investments in ESG, and that was more important than finding new risk-adjusted investments.
The great thing is that there are successful examples in other parts of the world where social bonds have helped governments with housing, with education, with healthcare. That's a positive. We can look to those countries, like, for example, Ecuador, Guatemala. Those are some of the examples that have been used in this proposal.
So what I should say is actually the idea of a sovereign social bond is something new.
Right.
And so you've just listed the countries that have done it so far. That's it. Yeah. Ecuador was first. Guatemala was second. Guatemala raised... you mentioned the 100 billion rand kind of idea that what could be raised. If you think that's crazy, Guatemala raised the equivalent of about 20 or 25 billion rand.
Sure.
So it gives you a ballpark of what might be possible.
So here's, I suppose, where the challenges come in. When there is very little room now to stimulate the economy. We know that we now face a contraction this year. The budget deficit is set to widen to more than 10% of GDP as well. Is a social impact bond particularly well suited to that kind of economic environment?
Well, the first thing that I should say, and that's probably the topic for another discussion, but I think we could be doing more stimulating activity, actually, than what we're doing now. And, the shortfall in revenue, we will be issuing a paper in a few days, actually, our group, about this. We could actually, we do have to be careful around the health issues. It's not just a matter of simply opening up, but we could be allowing other activity and putting way more time into an effort into getting people back to work with better controls in place, townships, developing methodologies for physical distancing in townships, which we really haven't worked out, leveraging the community development workers better. There's a whole host of things we could be doing to strengthen, the ability of getting people active again and therefore raising tax revenue because businesses are less strained, a win-win. But there's no doubt that even in our best scenario, there's a shortfall in funding. Yeah. There's no good outcome. There's just kind of bad and worse and worst. That's where we are. That's the thing. Now, what this does is government's going to have a funding hole. There's just no doubt about it. What this does, the idea is to say, firstly, let's earmark the funding so that it has a performance element within it, which I think would be attractive. It's probably the lowest cost finance that could be raised. If one could be successful, and it's meant to be an innovation. If one could be successful at raising it at a repo rate based on these performance targets, it would be less expensive than going to the IMF. Now, you still have to go to the IMF and find all these sources, but it's going to be incredibly important to find the lowest cost source of finance given the amount of money the government's got to raise and given the extent to which tax revenue is going to fall. Because, of course, at the end of the day, it's the tax revenue that pays off the loans.
Yeah. So you've sent this proposal to National Treasury. Have you had any kind of feedback? Is there any reason in your mind that this proposal would be turned down?
So all of the proposals that are on our website have been engaged with government pretty deeply. We've been talking to Treasury probably for the past month around this, as with all the other proposals that we have. We've been speaking to leaders about it. We post papers often once we've been round the block with key decision makers to give them a chance to think about it. I think Treasury, the feedback has been very positive. But I think what government has been doing more broadly is that, there are certain channels that work. And when you're in a crisis, sometimes what you have to do is leverage the channels and the current know-how. They've been pursuing the raising of funding through, I guess, the usual way of doing it, which is understandable because they have to move quickly. We, however, have brought together a group of companies that are willing to do the work pro bono they're willing to give their tuma mina time, basically, to, book build and do any of the legal work. So if and when, hopefully, Treasury decides that it wants to do this, then, there's a team of people that would be able to support it, that would do it pro bono. Wow. So all of this was done pro bono, by the way. None of it was because it was commissioned or because somebody's paying us or whatever. It's completely tuma mina proposal. So I wouldn't even say, we're not pressurizing government. What we're trying to do as a group is come up with practical solutions. So the group, mostly involves, it's really a network of people who are policy economists or financial experts who know, like the former head of a budget office or the former head of public finance and treasury, the top social security and health economist in the country. These type of people who know how stuff works so that we can make big proposals.
Incredible stuff. Tuma mina indeed. Thanks very much for your time on the AM report. That's Dr. Miriam Altman. Thanks. She is convener of the COVID-19 Economists, and she's also commissioner at the National Planning Commission, telling us there those COVID-19 economists all doing the work pro bono.